Thanks, everyone, for coming, as it were. My name is Sean McDonald, and despite the first slide in this presentation, I actually work for a company called Social Impact Lab. We make FrontlineSMS and another product called Frontline Cloud, and a product you'll see us release in the next month or so, just called FrontlineSync. Essentially what we do is we build tools that make it easier to do just about everything using text messaging. So the reason that we choose text messaging is, in ways that lots and lots of people know by now. It is literally the world's most used digital communication platform. Mobile phone penetration by the end of 2014 is expected to reach over 100%. And text messaging is the only platform, the only communication technology other than voice calls that is available on every single connection, just about. The other thing that we don't talk about quite as much is that from a design perspective, the limitations of the text messaging actually significantly clarify the quality of information presented. If you can get someone to sit down and say message by message, 160 characters by 160 characters, what does a communication look like? You essentially isolate the building blocks that you can then build back up into significantly more complex or significantly more tech-enabled architectures. But we really use sort of the expansion opportunities created by SMS to help systems run more effectively, and that's obviously super dependent on the intellectual and otherwise investment of whoever's involved. But there is no question at this point that low-end mobile phones are still the only really viable two-way communication technology out there to reach lots and lots of people, reach more than twice as many people as the internet. Despite the fact that this graph stops in 2011, the numbers that Pew just put out is that even in the United States, only 55% of the population has a smartphone. Many parts of Africa and Eurasia, internet penetration remains significantly below 20%, many places below 10. So SMS ends up being one of those platforms that's able to traverse the gap. The challenge is that a lot of people still experience SMS on a phone like this. This is the Nokia 1100, which is, up until very recently, the largest selling consumer electronics device in human history. They moved over 700 million units, which is amazing. Yeah, no, and they're unstoppable. They have a flashlight on them. Like they're wonderful.
They take the licking.
Oh yeah, and they'll go for like a month. Yeah. The problem with them, but a small criticism, is they don't offer a lot in terms of sophistication when it comes to a data management interface. So here you have the world's most used digital information channel, and everyone's participating on it. So FrontlineSMS and Frontline Cloud, despite all of the Latin here, are platforms that essentially enable you to do a lot more. Not only are you able to look at it, look at message traffic at volume the way you would in an inbox, but you're able to go in and use things like activities and archive folders to sort, to automate interactions, and to significantly, ultimately reduce the human cost of effective two-way engagement. The idea is that we're able to hopefully distill, really specific things like polls into clear and understandable response rates, breakdowns according to what answers each person gave. The idea is that inboxes in and of themselves are great two-way communication tools, but they're terrible at managing communication at volume. If you were to get 100,000 emails a day, you wouldn't have any more idea about what they said than if you got, whatever you were able to read in a day. So the limitations of SMS actually make it a much easier platform to parse and understand and structure. And so we built a handful of visualizations in the tool, and then also have integrations with a number of other tools that make it easier to understand what that communication looks like at volume. So in June of 2012, we rewrote the platform and re-released it, and now we've had about 200,000 downloads in 199 countries, and we're relatively certain that we've got active users in about 135 countries. I mean, but the moral of it, the point is that with better and more sophisticated tools, we can get more out of the data channels and the systems looking to use sort of more technologically advanced tools. Super quickly, I've included a cartoon interlude. So these are all in the medical context, but what's important about them is essentially the communication tools. And this is part of a lot of what our team does in workshops, is figuring out what the communication needs of an organization are and finding points of opportunity to use SMS. And actually now Frontline Sync will include missed calls, but essentially very, very low bandwidth, low cost, low barrier to entry technologies to reduce kind of latency in systems. So through the story arc of these cartoon slides, you'll see the other thing that we really care about and think is very different about the way that we encourage Frontline to be used, which is that we really focus on driving a return on investment in the sense of increasing the number of throughput in the system, whether that's patients in a medical system or clients in a banking system, but while reducing the cost of communication and outreach. So another, in addition to simple querying or simple request and service delivery, we see a lot of internal management happen through Frontline. So organizations that have distributed networks, which just actually was at South by Southwest presenting on an internews project with Harry Serjati running a distributed journalism network in Indonesia, where people became kind of information brokers using SMS between the population and the government, managed to expedite some really important projects. Similarly, we see a lot of inventory management go up, and a lot of kind of what does the outer lying area reporting back to a central area look like. I actually haven't told Brian this yet, but we've just gotten some seed funding to work with him and Gustavo from Info Amazonia on a sensor-fed project so what is mobile-fed, what is sensor-fed mobile kind of data? Everyone's heard the term maybe the Internet of Things, what does the mobile of things look like? And so that'll be an exciting project to get started. Some of the places that I think you also get really interesting work are, basic things like referrals. So a lot of times you'll have people out in a community recognizing a problem, but also recognizing the need for more sophisticated facilities or knowledge to fix that problem. And oftentimes in distributed environments, things like referrals are difficult to follow up on, they're difficult to track, they involve using motorcycles to transfer lots of records really long distances. This entire cartoon has actually come out of a very specific project, which was run by a friend and colleague, Josh Nesbitt, but this was working with St. Gabriel's Hospital in Malawi. And through the course of 6 months, they were able to save 2,100 man-hours and $3,500 just in saving transportation costs alone. For this particular clinic, which served a catchment area of about 250,000 people with, I think, 2 doctors and 3 nurses, every hour and dollar saved was a big benefit. So anyway, our work started with community organizing. It's this idea that if we build tools that enable, if we build tools that don't require us to get going, what can people do on their own? And as it turns out, quite a lot. One of our very first use cases was working with a group, really watching a group work to monitor the elections in 2008 in Nigeria. Sort of our first very popular use case. This is one that is difficult to discern unless you read, I want to say Arabic, but I think that's not right. Anyway, Urdu. Yeah, that's totally right. So this is from Pakistan. This is the immediate aftermath a flood, and Rocta Consultants was using Frontline and essentially set up a report in and help coordinate the disaster response effort. Another one was Kubatana.net, who many may know is the organization that eventually developed Freedom Phone and just ultimately are kind of really rad pro-democracy activists in Zimbabwe, which is not a really easy place to do that. Some of the early work was involved in getting kind of ideas for the new constitution and fostering dialogue that way, and they used Frontline and a number of other kind of crafty community organizing techniques to really foster a dialogue. Lastly, or not sort of lastly, this is ActionAid put up an award-winning program to kind of help distribute food aid in the aftermath of the drought. This is in kind of East Africa, Horn of Africa area. The thing about being in a largely donor-led space and creating tools that encourage communities to interact is that the monitoring and evaluation component of that becomes very difficult to standardize, and data is difficult to come by unless you have the clear metrics up front. So over the last couple of years, we've developed a consultancy and some tools for really professionalizing the way that we manage impact. Our consultancy is now a lot more involved in direct project implementation than it has been historically, than it was when we first got started. But I think that, over the last 8 years or so, we've also developed a lot more to bring to the table. So, quick examples. This is an Indonesian group that annually organized a river cleanup, and they would do it manually, kind of phone by phone tree, and just within 1 year of using Frontline as sort of a better set of tools, they went from 200 participants to 2,000 participants, and set the world record for at least the Indonesia record for the largest river cleanup. I believe it's world, but don't quote me on that. The malaria, Imagine No Malaria campaign. Again, this is it's probably worth saying that we started with SMS. We'll be releasing this call soon, but we build in APIs, we build in a cloud-based platform and an offline platform. I think we all, everyone on our team anyway, very much believes in a multi-channel, the multi-channel future. So it's not, I'm not coming out and saying like, you gotta use SMS for everything, which I think would be a ridiculous statement. And hopefully, we've never made that statement. But the Malaria No More campaign took this multi-channel approach where they did online and offline organizing, and through the course of their interaction, they saw a 5% reduction in malaria over DRC, or in DRC. Obviously, that's correlation, not causation, but a 5% drop in malaria in a pretty difficult working environment is also, I think, a pretty impressive result. Similarly, some good friends at Mercy Corps put together a land titling program in Bolivia. They did SMS and call centers and a handful of other interventions, but over the course of, I think, a 2-year project, they were able to see a 40% reduction in cost and an 80% reduction in time. An 80% reduction in time to get a land titling, which is transformative in terms of the way that the system works. And it's been really, really impressive, and it's a model that they've built out now into, they're doing it in, I think, Bogota and Medellin in Colombia. The Brusara Center is a job allocation center. Long story short, through using better SMS tools, they've reduced 97% of their administration time. I mean, so much of what they did was outreach. Another group of people that this applies to very frequently is librarians. Like, you'd be amazed what can be done with an SMS in terms of late notices. But, for us, and I think kind of the direction that Frontline's headed, and I'm happy to sort of explain more about the technology roadmap and some of the policy roadmap, but really what we're aiming toward is better participatory processes. How do you build cleaner on-ramps, whether it's through to literate populations or illiterate populations, through to people who have no phones to dumb phones to the very smartest phones. And I think that's, a lot of it is about some of it is about the technology. Most of it is about using technology to create the opportunity to reconsider the way that systems communicate. And I think that opportunity and that window of opportunity is where we really see a lot of our work taking hold and adding real value. A throwback quote for us, just to show you how long we've been around, is in 2007, the Africa Journal, which seems super specific, said, some nice things about our approach. But essentially, it is just this idea that if we can build the tools and create low enough barriers to things that people are able to achieve, the way that systems are able to evolve, is something that ends up becoming really inspiring, at least, to a lot of people on our team. And we've had the great fortune of seeing that happen in a lot of places. Recognizing that you all are much more expert about a lot of this than I am, I'll wrap up there. But, lots of interesting stuff. Lots of other interesting stuff to talk about as you're interested.